Well, hey everybody, this is Real Honesty with Joe Wrestling, and here is another retro review where I'm going to talk about Eddie Guerrero's WWE title win at No Way Out 2004 and Chris Benoit's world title win at WrestleMania 20 about a month later. I'm not going to compare and say which one was more emotional, though I will say the one that always impacted me more was Eddie Guerrero's. Now, the Benoit one is right under there. I mean, taking a look at just in-ring career, in-ring moments, it was great to see both men win titles, especially since they made their names elsewhere. And yes, they became big stars in WWE, but they had built their name up elsewhere and were pretty damn respected and pretty damn impressive well before they got to WWE. Now, I'm not going to hit every single highlight and everything. I'm not going to talk about their deaths, so I will say that Eddie's death saddened me a whole lot more. Benoit's, I did a show about that, and you can check that out if you want. That was a couple years ago, or it was at least back in June 2017, so almost a couple years ago. But I'm gonna take a look at some highlights and everything to build up, and then get to this. Then get to their title wins. And the thing is I enjoyed what I did for Starrcade '83 and Starrcade '93 when I talked about Ric Flair's two main events 10 years apart. So I figured, hell, 15 years, this year, why not take a look at Eddie Guerrero from his time in the, brief time in the AWA, where he's teaming with his brothers, with Art Barr and AAA, being in Japan, facing off against, Benoit before they would really become famous. They worked really well together. That's also where they met Dean Malenko and stuff like that. They did form the Three Amigos, and that was some good stuff. Those guys, their styles really worked well in Japan. To ECW, he worked more in Japan, but then from I think it was 95 on, he was in WCW and became a pretty big star. Yes, he did have the auto wreck at the end of '98 that did take a lot out of him, as would be expected, and he came back maybe a little too soon, and had a bit of a run and everything, but then things really started to fall off the rails in WCW. Got to WWE along with Benoit and Dean and Perry Saturn as the Radicals. Eddie did end up hurting his elbow. His elbow literally went to the side. It was a scary thing. He ended up having to have surgery. He did recover. And he had a bit of a run. He was European champion. I think he had that really good run with China. That was actually probably the highlight of his run. 2001 started to have some issues, especially after WrestleMania 17. Had the drug issues. He went away, did manage to get clean, all that stuff and everything. Came back, had a good run with RVD as Intercontinental Champion, became U.S. Champion in 2003, and, the first WWE U.S. Champion. And then lost at the Big Show at No Mercy 2003, was teaming with Chavo again. Then they broke up after they failed to win the tag titles back. Eddie beat up Chavo, or beat Chavo in a match at Royal Rumble 2004, controlling his Latino heat. Could he control his temper? He did, to an extent, beat him, and then beat the shit out of Chavo and Chavo Sr. after that. That was something else. But then he got hotshot literally into an angle with Brock Lesnar. And I think because Brock Lesnar, they were wanting to get to Brock Lesnar and Goldberg, but they were like, well, we need to get the title off of Brock, even though I think looking back on it, it's probably a good thing they didn't make it for the title, because then they really would have shit all over the legacy of the title. But with 10 days notice, 10 to 17 days notice, really not even 3 weeks, they were building and building and building up the whole thing of Eddie and Brock having this match. And Heyman bringing up the issues and everything, and Eddie saying that he has issues and he's quelled them and he's embraced them and he doesn't run away from them. He knows what he did and he's done everything he can to make amends and everything, and that he is, not high on drugs, he's high on life. And it was a great moment, in just among a big Latino audience. I believe it was in the Cow Palace, if I remember right, No Way Out 2004, which the reason I'm not reviewing No Way Out 2004 in its entirety is if you've ever seen the show, there are two matches that are worth watching. It's Cena, Angle, and Big Show in a triple threat. That's a number one contenders match to see who would face the WWE champion at WrestleMania 20. Spoiler alert, it was Kurt. And then there was Eddie and Brock. Other than that, it was not a very good show. It really wasn't. It was a highlight of the brand split, not getting, SmackDown not getting as much love in the brand split. But Eddie and Brock having that great match where it was the underdog versus, it was David versus Goliath. It really was. Even though Eddie was bigger than he had been, and should have been able to, put on a good match with Brock, you were thinking, okay, well, Brock's just going to wipe the floor with him. Well, they had it where Eddie was getting thrown around a lot and Brock was just beating him up and yelling, "Just die, Eddie, just die." And I think they've even added that out on, I think they've added that out on the network. I haven't watched it for a bit, but I believe that was what happened the last time. I didn't think they need to add that out because Brock, it wasn't like Brock actually wanted death to happen to Eddie. He wasn't wishing that kind of stuff. That's a little bit much. I can understand editing some things on the network, but it happened. Why do that? But once Brock made a mistake and hurt his knee, Eddie started focusing on the knee, and Brock's like in his face and everything in the ring, even though he's selling his knee. Eddie manages to get him in a leg lock, and I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. But it's just like the crowd, like he gets Brock starting to scream in pain. The crowd starts chanting Eddie really, really, really fucking loud. I mean, really loud. Big Latino audience there at the Cow Palace. I mean, it was great. And I think Eddie's mother was even there. I think a lot of his family was too. But it was just great, to hear that kind of support for Eddie and everything. And this was, of course, earlier in the night you had Brock and Goldberg have a bit of a face-off and everything, even though Goldberg was a Raw superstar. Austin had him go there because they had the thing happen at the Royal Rumble after Brock had retained the title over Hardcore Holly going back a bit. Goldberg was in the Rumble, and they had their brief face-off, and then Brock ran in and hit an F5 on Goldberg, and then Goldberg got eliminated by Kurt Angle, and that ended up happening, and they ended up doing that feud, which ended up shitting the bed and everything. But, and I may do a reflection, actually, on, that worst match, maybe compare Goldberg and Lesnar's, WrestleMania 20 and WrestleMania 33 match, even though there's no comparison. Clearly, the 33 match was better. But Goldberg does a run-in at one point, hits a spear on Lesnar, and the referee's down, of course. I mean, because the referee's always down. The referees are made of like fucking tissue paper. Or they're like the weakest people in the world when they just get knocked down, because then they just take a fucking nap for a while. It was like the referee in the WrestleMania 17 match with Triple H and Undertaker. He just took a fucking nap. I can't remember if it was Mike Chioda or I think it was Mike Chioda. I'm not knocking Chioda, but I think it was him because that was pretty famous. But it was what it was. Referee bumps always make me laugh. But anyway, Eddie had brought the title in and, goes for it. Brock ends up hitting trying for an F5. Eddie ends up hitting the DDT and goes for it and looks like he's going to, get the victory. He ends up eventually getting the victory, with a big old frog splash. 1, 2, 3. And the energy and love that Eddie Guerrero got from that crowd after he had won was an absolute, just, it was mind-blowing. It was great. It just showed how beloved Eddie was. He's celebrating with his family, celebrating with all the fans. They love him, everything. It makes me emotional now, even thinking about it, so I'm really trying not to focus on it too much, because I don't want to cry on camera. And yeah, I know, it just sounds a little silly to cry over wrestling, but when you get invested in something like that, it means a lot. And Eddie Guerrero's title win really did mean a whole lot, because it was all the sacrifice, all the trials, all the rough times that he had in his career, and some were of his own doing, and he admitted that. It showed it was validation for the hard work he had in his career that he did, and just how good Eddie Guerrero actually was in the ring. And we all knew he was good. Like, a lot of the fans really knew that Eddie Guerrero was good for a number of years before he got to WWE. But just watching how he was able to do that and just finally capture the big one, like, we all knew that he was capable and deserved to have. He earned it, even on a very, very little build, on very little build with that match with Brock Lesnar. Him winning the title, now, yes, you could argue winning the title at a pay-per-view like that might have tainted it, that maybe it should have happened at Mania. But honestly, it was a shocking win. It was a great win, and it was great to see Eddie Guerrero with the WWE title. And then you have him go on to face Kurt Angle in a really good match at WrestleMania 20, where Eddie ends up kind of cheating, loosening his boot after the ankle lock, and ends up getting a roll up and ties his feet around, wraps his feet around the rope to get pin Kurt Angle. And so he retains there, and then you got the whole thing with JBL and stuff like that, and they cut off Eddie's title win a little bit sooner. I think Eddie should have held it longer, but he probably didn't feel that he was doing a good job as champion when he was doing the best he could. And really, I wish he'd gotten a second run. I really do. I think he would have. I think he would have beaten Batista and become world champion. It's so sad. But Eddie Guerrero's title win, super emotional and everything, and I spent enough time on that, so it's about 10 minutes. Now I'm going to go to Benoit's victory. Now, Eddie, again, I'm going to tie the whole thing together with how WrestleMania 20 ended. But with Benoit, he had come back from a neck injury in 2002. Him and Eddie were teaming up in, pretty good tag team. Really good tables match with Bubba and Spike at Vengeance 2002. Benoit did, team with Angle and everything, and they had that friendly, not so friendly rivalry where they were a team. Then they faced off at Royal Rumble 2003. Benoit almost had it, but had to tap out to the ankle lock. He teamed with Rhino at WrestleMania 19 against, world's greatest tag team. Well, I mean, Team Angle at the time. But then, then they became the world's greatest tag team, but also against Los Guerreros. It was for the SmackDown tag titles, the WWE tag titles, because Raw had the world tag titles. When the brand split actually meant something. At least that original brand split. But then Benoit, enters the U.S. title tournament. And Rhino ends up screwing him over while the referee's down, hits a spear. Eddie ends up winning, just shrugging his shoulders and everything and doing the frog splash and getting the victory. And then Benoit ends up kind of in a U.S. title feud for a bit, ends up feuding with A-Train, I believe, at No Mercy 03, if I recall correctly. And then starts to get built back up and everything. And the idea is, okay, he's going to be in the Royal Rumble and maybe he'll have a good run. I didn't think he was going to win the thing. Even at number one, even with all the build they had done of Benoit can't win the big one, Benoit can't win the big one. Despite the fact, if you go back, and just going back in his career a little bit, if you go back to his time in ECW, he had some good runs. As Pegasus Kid or Wild Pegasus in Japan, he had some good runs. Especially facing off against Jushin Thunder Liger. Looking at his WCW run, he had a great run with the Horsemen. He was, a tag team champion. He was a U.S. champion. I don't think he was ever a TV champion, or if he was, it wasn't very memorable. But he was even the world champion on his last night in the company. And then, left and formed the Radicals and this kind of stuff. And had a pretty good run until he got his neck injured in 01. And then that catches us up to speed with what I just talked about. With Benoit, being number one at the Royal Rumble, him and Orton started off. They had a good scrap and everything. And Benoit eliminated, multiple people. I mean, maybe not as much as the number one should have, because it probably would have established him more. But he was shown as the Iron Man. And even after that, even in 05, 06, and 07, like his last Royal Rumble, he still had some good performances. He obviously never matched what he did there. But it was pretty interesting to see that I don't even think, he was never part of a Rumble. He was never part of a Rumble until 2004. Because think about it. He had the ladder match with Chris Jericho at Royal Rumble 2001. He was out in 2002 because of a neck injury. In 03, he faced off against Angle. So he only had 4 Rumbles in his seven and a half years with the company. But anyway, he enters number one, ends up winning the whole thing. He ends up eliminating Big Show, where Big Show looks like he's about to get him. Benoit gets a front face lock on him and just gradually eases him up and everything. I still get emotional about it. I still get goosebumps because it was a cool finish, but it's like you're thinking, oh no, Big Show's going to stop, and then Big Show starts to gradually topple. Once his legs start to get up off the ground, people are like, he's going to do it. And Big Show falls out, and Benoit wins. JR sells the fuck out of that thing. I mean, it was absolutely wonderful. And Benoit wins, and he's going to go on to win, to face off against a world champion or something like that. I think maybe they implied that he could, choose to face maybe the SmackDown champion, but he decided no, he was going to go face Triple H, because Triple H, earlier in the night, had faced off against Shawn Michaels in a great last man standing match, but both couldn't answer the count. So it ended up being a draw, but the draw goes to the champion. Benoit, has won the Rumble, so he's going to face off against Triple H, or so we think. Shawn Michaels ends up getting inserted into the match, and honestly, I would have preferred it to be one-on-one. I remember at the time being very frustrated, and of course, this is pre-Twitter. I mean, Facebook had just started like a year before. There weren't really a lot of wrestling forums, or like that many that I was on. It was pretty cool, though. And Benoit was locked into the match where he was going to face off against Shawn Michaels and Triple H. But they tried to make it like about, a couple feuds, like Benoit against the world pretty much, because it was can Benoit win the big one, and Triple H and Shawn wanting to settle their feud. Even though their feud would go on after this and main event on a pay-per-view where Benoit was champion, it was what it was. But you take a look at what Benoit did. That great match that they had, the triple threat, it was all built up where Eddie had won earlier in the night. He had beaten Kurt Angle to retain the title. Now factor in to the aftermath here. But great moments watching Benoit become champion and everything, where, Shawn Michaels got busted open, Triple H got busted open. I don't think Benoit was bleeding, or if Benoit was bleeding, he wasn't bleeding much. But Shawn was bleeding, of course, Triple H was bleeding. Ric Flair probably got busted open backstage because everything causes Ric Flair to start bleeding. But he was in an earlier tag match. I always joke about Flair. Glad Flair's healthy, but boy, Ric Flair just got busted open so many times in his matches. So anyway, let's go back to the match, though. It was a lot of fun. Great psychology. You would usually have a guy taken out like in the ring or taken out outside. And then say like Shawn and Triple H would fight and they chop each other. Or Benoit and Shawn would chop each other. Or Triple H and Shawn, or Triple H and Benoit. The whole point is you would get one guy outside, and then you would just get two guys in the ring scrapping and having a good match. And there were some good near falls and stuff like that, but it all built to a crescendo where eventually Shawn and Triple H, who had been in this blood feud and still were going to be for a number of months, looked at this announcer's table and were like, "Hey, wait a second!" They picked up Benoit in a double suplex and threw him through the announcer's table, and that took Benoit out for a bit. Then Shawn and Triple H are fighting and everything, and Triple H is going to win. Oh no, Shawn's going to win. And then Benoit just literally comes from nowhere back into the match. And the finish was great because you had Shawn set up for Sweet Chin Music. He goes for it. Benoit catches him underneath, throws him out of the ring, and then Triple H tries for the pedigree. Benoit gets the crossface on or whatever, and he's got the crossface on, so it's like facing towards the stage side. So Triple H looks like he could maybe get to the ropes and everything. And he's starting to fade and everything. The referee gets his hand, he gets it back up. And then he pushes, he thinks he's going to push out of it. Well, he pushes to the other side. He pushes over, like more towards the middle of the ring. And Benoit's still holding on and everything. And Shawn's not even moving. He's not even getting back in the ring and everything. And Triple H is just fading. And then actually taps. And I just remember seeing and just being absolutely just flabbergasted watching that Triple H actually tapped out. And that was something else. So, and he beat the champion. It wasn't like he beat the other guy and Triple H was going to have a way out. No, I will say this much about Triple H. He should have put Booker T over the previous WrestleMania. The fact that he fucking didn't still bothers me. And I did a rant about that. That was last year. But, this was something else. And Benoit winning the world title and beating the champion was something else. And it would do that rematch a month later at Backlash. And then he would beat... Shawn Michaels was a sharpshooter, and it was what it was. And, of course, the Montreal Screwjob, all that stuff. And a Canadian beating Shawn this time. Still didn't make up for it, but anyway. So you think of the aftermath. And you think of Benoit winning the world title and everything, and the confetti falling and all that stuff. And Eddie's there holding the WWE title. And these two guys that you never that you knew deserved to be champion, but you never thought would be champion in the big company in WWE, ended up being champion. And closing the show. And being the guys that were going to be figured in on each respective brand and featured with each world title, it was a miracle to see. It was great to see. Eddie deserved it. At the time, Benoit deserved it. There was really no doubt that it was great. It was just great all around. It was a great end to WrestleMania 20, which I can't say was one of the greatest WrestleManias ever. I think it was back in 2017, I did an entire ranking of like all the WrestleManias at the time, so it would have been like ranking them from worst to best, but I went in detail of like, various ones. And then when I got to the best ones, I did all of them. I did like one a show. But anyway, the whole point is watching the end of WrestleMania 20, maybe one of the greatest WrestleMania endings ever. In fact, I might have to do a countdown of that. The 10 best and 10 worst, or maybe rank every single WrestleMania ending from worst to best. Ooh, I think I'm going to do that. Let me know in the comments if that's something you guys will want to see. But this was really, really good. Benoit managing to, wrestle the world title away from Triple H. And just these two guys, these two great wrestlers, these two amazing talents that had fought so long and got so far. But in the end, it did matter. And yeah, it's a bit of a twist in the Linkin Park lyrics. But this was great. It was great to see. And then, of course, Benoit did have his feud. And faced Kane at Bad Blood 2004, and Triple H and Shawn main evented in the Hell in a Cell match. And then he lost it to Randy Orton at SummerSlam 04, and then never had the world title again. Now, honestly, I think he should have had the world title again, but it was what it was. It was an or WWE title maybe even, because WWE title actually got put over to Raw in the draft. in 2005 when Cena jumped and then Batista jumped and they switched brands. It would have been interesting to see if Benoit could have been champion again, but Eddie's title win will always stick out more in my mind, though Benoit's is right up there. It is really, really damn good. But I'm going to work on that list of WrestleMania endings ranked from worst to best, but let me know what you guys think of this video in the comments, and are there other title wins that you want to see me compare that happened at like various shows? Just let me know. Make sure it's like, make sure it's something that kind of like ties together or whatever from 5, 10, 15, 20 years, something like that. Just let me know. But anyway, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. Spend real honesty with John Ritlin. I will see you soon.